There's the snap. The game is over. The Chargers know it. Their fans know it. And the Rowdy Buck bunch across the field behind our benches making more noise than the Chargers. The Buccaholics. The Buccaholics. The Buccaholics are standing proud in red. The game is over. The Rowdy Buck bunch. The Buccaholics. The Buccaholics are standing proud in red. The game is over. The Rowdy Buck bunch.
Fan-Tastic.
Buccaholics.
Fan-Tastic.
Buccaholics. Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Buccaholics.
Fan-Tastic.
Buccaholics.
Fan-Tastic.
Buccaholics.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Fantastic.
What's going on, Buccaholics? Oh my goodness, it's been a minute. It's been too long since I've had the opportunity to do one of these episodes. Now, I know some of y'all out there wondering why has it been such a long time between episode 8 and episode 9 of this of Buccaholics Fantastic. Just know that that we're back. I'm not going to lie to you. I'll be completely honest. It's a little disheartening to have to record an episode of a podcast when your team is stinking up the bed like our team was for a few weeks there. But that wasn't the only reason why I haven't been here with you guys. It's also been a real busy time for me at work. As some of y'all know, I've got a new job this year teaching at a new school, and everything changes, and my workload has just kind of increased quite a bit. So I've been trying to keep up with that as well. But, I told you guys way back in episode 1, I said, I don't know how long this is going to run. I don't know how many episodes we'll do or how often we'll do them, but I'm going to just keep doing it until I get tired of it. And or until I'm too busy. And I just got a little bit too busy for a minute there. So all that aside, we are back. And ladies and gentlemen, I am so happy to be here on a Victory Monday. I got to tell you, this is 2 weeks in a row now that we've had a Victory Monday, and I kind of like the feeling, and I'm really hoping that it keeps up for a little bit. Now, I'm not going to be one of those people that says, oh, we're going to win out, we're going to the playoffs, and this is our year. And no, I don't know about any of that. I'll tell you the honest truth. We beat 2 teams that we should have beat. That's what has happened in the last 2 weeks. We beat 2 teams that we should have beat, and that's all I'm going to say about that. I appreciate everybody's opinions, and y'all feel free to sound off in the comments when we post this bad boy up in the Facebook group and tell me if I'm wrong. But that's all I'm going to say. We beat 2 teams that we needed to beat, and 2 teams that we deservedly should have beaten. And in my opinion, we should have beat both of them worse than we did, but let's not get too far into that right now. Some of you may be wondering, well, Jay, who's that Spotlight fan guest going to be this week? Well, you may see him sitting down in the corner of the screen right now. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with this gentleman. I myself just met him a couple of days ago. You know how Facebook and the Buccaholics group has a tendency to bring people together. Well, I happened upon this gentleman who was talking about the fact that his family had direct connections to the beginnings of this team that we love. And I just thought that was the most interesting thing I had heard in a while. And as I started to chat with him, I realized that this is a guy who has a lot of stories to tell. And that's what this show is all about, is giving you guys the opportunity to tell your stories. So I want to welcome him in right now, ladies and gentlemen, welcoming to episode 9 of Buccaholics Fantastic, Mr. Mark Urbanski. How's it going, Mark?
Hey Jay, how are you out there?
I'm doing great, man. How's the weather in Tampa?
Oh, it's about 60 degrees, clear as a bell. I call it Chamber of Commerce weather. I'm sitting here about 2 miles from the Ray J, where we'll be back in a couple weeks after Green Bay and Atlanta.
Oh man, that does sound. See, I'm sitting out here, and you would think California, we got to have some good weather, right? But if I look outside my window right now, all I see is gray. As far as I can see, all I see is gray.
Well, call me during the summer when it's 100% humidity down here, and I'll tell you, you live in perfect weather out there with me. Down here is not fun, but I will say this time of year, it's awesome.
It sounds just about right. So we've had a little conversation just on Facebook Messenger, Mark. But do me a favor and tell me. Let's get this started with pretty much the same way that I start with everybody. I want to know, and this I think is going to unlock a whole Pandora's box of conversations that we can have right now. But I'm going to ask you this first very generic question, and then just kind of see where it takes us. And that is, how did you become a Buccaneers fan?
Great question, and it goes back to 1976, the inception, which we've had the same season tickets roughly, from the El Sombrero to the new Ray J. But fortunately, we wound up where we were in the old stadium. Um, as far as I appreciate you reaching out to me too, and what you do for Buccaholics and bringing Bucks Nation together, because already I feel like I have more friends that are diehard fans, and it's not easy being a Bucks fan.
Oh, no. We know all about that. Those of us.
And they were talking about yesterday it being an ugly win. There is no ugly win as a Bucks fan.
Hey, a W is a W.
That's right.
And we'll take them any way we can get them.
Yep, absolutely. But I'm hoping in Atlanta, and we're going to talk about that later on. I hope we fare well. I think that they made some changes. Winston hurt his shoulder. Maybe, he wasn't throwing accurately after the initial injury, and he'll be back. But Fitzpatrick is doing a stand-up job filling in for him with 2 W's in the meantime,
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, tell me.
Back to the inception. Prior to 1976, Tampa had the University of Tampa Spartans, and the most famous players for them were Freddie Solomon, who played for the 49ers, and he played for the Dolphins, and John Matuzak. So as a boy, Dad would take the family to the games and get us down on the sideline because of his career enabled him to do so with the Tampa Tribune newspaper, as well as being part of the Tampa Sports Authority, which oversees all the, college teams at the time, and now the Bucks, Lightning, and Rays. And so I was a diehard Spartans fan. That's all we had. And I remember being on the sideline, and Freddie Solomon played quarterback for the Spartans. He was a receiver for the Dolphins and the 49ers, and he ran a quarterback keeper for 99 yards and came back from the end zone, heading back to the bench, and slapped me high five, and I was hooked after that.
That's one way to get started, huh? Now you mentioned the Trib. Did your dad work for the Trib, or?
He graduated from University of Illinois with a degree in journalism and wanted to be a sports writer, but it turns out he got into the newspaper business through selling advertising, and then just worked his way up to be the president of the Tampa Tribune. So he ran everything over there. Wow. So when the sports section is, let's face it, Monday morning we'd run to the front porch to grab the sports section to read about the Bucks, as did half of Tampa back then, and it was just a germane part of the Bucks, and being a Bucks fan, and reading what you saw the day before, and with hopes of better times after the 0-14 first season, and then the 2-12 second season, where they beat the Saints in New Orleans and beat the Cards the next week, which I was at that game, and I was 11 years old at the time.
Oh man! See,
I wanted to have a ticker tape after that,
Oh, I believe it. See, and the folks that watch this know me. I started watching the Bucks when I was about 8 years old, which was 1978. So I got in just ahead of the first good times.
You missed the first 2 years, which were fun because it was new, but you didn't miss much though, other than we were so delighted to not have to pull for Miami anymore and to have our home team. They could have gone winless for another 5 years. I'd still be a Bucks fan.
Now, you were telling me about your about the connection that your dad had to actually bringing the team to Tampa. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So we had the Spartans, and then
Oh,
Dad and
hold up. Sit back just a tiny bit there, Mark. There you go. Now I can
oh,
see you.
we had the Spartans, and then Dad and about 4 or 5 of his buddies wanted to land an NFL franchise. And so they went through all the administrative, the filing and everything. And what they would do is go to all the Super Bowls because the owners all meet prior to the Super Bowl. And then they'd also have meetings in New York at the league headquarters up there. And they would go up there and pitch Tampa to the league owners as a viable candidate for a franchise. So they started about 1970, and then 75 they got the knock, and they allowed the Seattle Seahawks and the Bucks into the league the same year. And 76 was the inaugural season.
And so you were a season ticket holder from year one, right?
From year one, and but Dad and his buddies, I think they've been to more Super Bowls than anybody I know because they they had regular jobs, but they were passionate about sports in Tampa. They were passionate about the community, and they loved football, so they wanted pro football here. So anyway, they landed the team. Dad happened to be president of the Tampa Sports Authority. There was a paid post there too, a gentleman by the name of Joe Zalubski, who was executive director. Dad was president. They landed the team. Next thing you know, we're sitting on the 50, 17 rows up.
So
And,
go ahead.
no, it was great. And so we were so happy to have pro football that, even getting blown out, it was just so new. And the long shot of Tampa, which was kind of a unknown one horse town on the west coast of Florida. When you travel, they'd say, "Are you from Miami?" No. Tampa, where's that? Then they'd say Tampa Bay, and I'd say, well, that's a body of water. It's Tampa. And so it was it was one of those things where we are obscure, but when you land an NFL franchise, it kind of puts you on the map nationally.
Yeah, it definitely changes everything for a city when you get that kind of recognition and get a franchise like that. That's why so many cities want that. Now tell me a little bit about the first game you remember. First game you remember going to.
Well, I remember back then they would have 4 preseason games, and so there would have been the very first one, and that it was so new. Even preseason was off the charts. And then I remember some unusual games, like against the Chiefs, where it rained like 4 inches in an hour, and I'm sitting there and looking at my dad, and he would stay to the very end, till the last second, ran off the clock, and it was like 6-3, and I think the Chiefs kicked another field goal and won 9-3, and we weren't leaving. Come foul weather, lightning, whatever it was, we were staying till the very end. And I remember the players at the time. Your Ricky Bell, your Jerry Eckwood, originally Spurrier was the quarterback. I'll never forget, because he was left-handed and he threw sidearmed, which no one throws sidearmed in the NFL. And then Jimmy Giles, Kevin House, Mark Cotney at safety. I mean, the list goes on, and they were like heroes of mine as a kid. Winning games, they were still larger than life.
I totally get that. Whether winning or not, these guys become so huge, especially in the mind of a child who's there at the game. And you said you were how old at this time? About 10, 11?
76. I was born in 66. 76. I was 10 and turned 11. In October, right mid-season or at the beginning of the season. So, yeah, it was great. It was phenomenal. And what they did was the old football stadium where the Spartans played, it had no end zones. So what they did to be able to accommodate an NFL team, they filled in the end zones and it cranked up the seating to 72,000. And that's where it was renamed as El Sombrero because it looked like a Mexican hat with the end zones on it. So,
so this is the same stadium that the college team played in?
With end zones built into the stadium. It was open on the ends and it had benches. They didn't have chairs back then. When the Super Bowls came, they would make some retrofits to it. But anyway, yes, that was the original stadium. They demoed that in 95, I believe, year after the Glazers bought it. They were the Bucks needed a new stadium. The problem is the taxpayers didn't want to pay for the stadium, so there was a county commissioner who liked the Bucks but was smart enough to bundle a half a penny sales tax with schools, fire stations, and all sorts of infrastructure, where then the non-football fans didn't mind paying the half a penny sales tax too. And so we built a new stadium and the Bucks are here to stay for good now.
Gotta love that. That's a beautiful thing. See, now I myself I lived in Central Florida for a little while when I was going to college, and I had the opportunity to go to some games when I was there. But this was prior to Raymond James. So as of now, I still have never set foot inside Raymond James Stadium.
It's a nice stadium.
I hear great things, and I really hope to one day get there. I was jealous as all hell because some of my friends from here in California had the opportunity to go to the last game there and watch that win over the Jets. But it just it comes down to a decision of which do I do? Do I buy a ticket and a plane ticket and fly to Tampa, or do I buy my 12-year-old and my 9-year-old Christmas presents? As you can likely imagine, the conversation did not take very long between myself and my wife before it was my trip to Tampa was vetoed.
Well, come on down and make a nice. You're going to Disneyland later this week. When you're ready for Disney World, come on down and visit the parks and come check out a game or two.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we're going to have to put into the plans. We out here in Buccaholic land on the West Coast, we try to go to games when they come out this way, and I know that we don't have any West Coast games next season at all. In fact, the closest they come to us next season is probably Dallas.
Dallas.
So we might try and make a trip to Dallas, but if not, then I think a Tampa trip is going to be in the cards for next season for me, and hopefully be able to bring the family and do exactly that. Maybe go to Disney World and check out a game on Sunday. Let my wife take the kids back to the park for one more day while I go to the Bucks game.
Well, we welcome you. We'd love to have you, as well as any Buccaholics out there, because unfortunately, there have been too many opposing fans there with the aftermarket for tickets now that, back in the day, even when we, were young and not winning any games, it would be mostly Bucks fans. But with NFL Ticket Network and everything now, you have way too many opposing fans there. But we're working on that. We win games, we'll fill up the stadium with our.
There you go. There you go. That's it. And you're absolutely right. The aftermarket game for tickets has kind of changed everything. And we were actually talking about this a little bit earlier in the year. And one of the things that gets mentioned often, and I think is true, is if you are a fan of an opposing team and you have the choice of going to an away game, who wouldn't want to go to Central Florida? Who wouldn't want to go to where you know the weather's going to be nice, to where you've got all these other attractions that are within easy driving distance of you and the game? So, I mean, I get it. And I understand that that a lot of our season ticket holders can't come to every game and they sell their tickets off. And I'm not too mad at them, but damn, it sure would be nice if we could fill all those seats with some more Bucks fans.
And I'd like to go out to the West Coast to check out a game sometime too. We typically don't play well on the West Coast, but we've been playing the 49ers pretty well lately. I think we played them last year, and I wish we were playing them this year. I don't think they've won a game this year, but and unless they won yesterday, I didn't check. But
they finally won yesterday.
All right.
Yeah, we we were last season was great for us on the West Coast because we had Arizona, which we went to. We didn't win that one, but we were there. San Francisco, which we won, and San Diego, which we won. So that was a banner year for us out here on the West Coast.
Especially playing out there on the West Coast, because when you travel that far, it's hard on those teams. Just vice versa. Last year we spanked the Seahawks here, which was the turning point of the season. That was an incredible game. They owned Russell Wilson last year in that game. It was 4:00 game. That was the best game of the season, in my opinion, last year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about this is another thing that I thought was really interesting when we were talking yesterday is you were talking about the opportunities that you've had to meet some of the players. So tell me a little bit about some of the guys that you've had the chance to meet and maybe some favorite moments.
Well, I'll tell you, for starters, and it kind of dovetails into the inception of the Bucks, and the original owner was Hugh Culverhouse, and then he sold the team. He passed away in the early 90s. The team was sold to the Glazers, and they also owned the Manchester United soccer team over in Britain too. So one of the not player, but I ran into the owner's son, either Brian or Joel Glazer, one day walking into my gym, and they were demoing the old Sombrero Tampa Stadium and building the Ray J, and it was going to open for that football season. So everybody was panicking that you'd go from the 50 to the 10-yard line or the end zone or whatever. And I said, "Hey, Brian," I go, we've had season tickets in the family since '76. Are we going to be, hooked up in the next stadium? And he said, "Oh, you're in a special category." And I went out on a limb because my dad's a very humble guy. He's a World War II generation. They're much more subdued, and maybe they don't blow as hard as we do in our generation. I said, and my dad and his buddies brought the Bucks, Super Bowl 18, Super Bowl 25, and the Outback Bowl to Tampa. And he said, "Who's your dad?" And I said, "Jim Urbanski." And he goes, "Oh, you're in a special category." So I never told my dad this. The tickets came. We wound up on the 48-yard line. And a couple of years later, I'm out on the golf course at his place up in North Carolina. And and with hesitation, start to tell him the story. "You did what?" Just because he's not that kind of guy. It's a different, old school World War II generation. And he turned to me, and he had retired for 10 years, and he smiled and he said, "Do whatever you got to do to get me on the 50.
There you go. That's the mindset right there.
We hooked up, but I mean, as of recently, like Simeon Rice was working out with me over at a club on Harbor Island, and he's a great guy. He played running back in high school. Walter Payton was his mentor and his coach. Then he turned to defensive end, and he was even talking about making a comeback other than the shoulder ailment he had. He's in good enough shape now at 40 or 41 to play pro football. There were some rumors flying around the web about him making a comeback due to the absence of pass rush until the Jets game. And he could probably do it if he had a good shoulder. But
That's
he was over there. He was a nice guy. Anyway,
No, that's funny that you mentioned that, because that has been kind of the chatter. It's been one of the stories of that I've seen this season that's kind of been amusing to me is the reaction from people, and on both sides. Some people saying, "Oh, well, he couldn't do it; he's too old," and other people saying, "I don't know, I think we could use him." And I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be mad at all.
no, if you saw him train, because he's like a specimen. I mean, he's ripped. He's an animal in the gym. I get tired watching him train, and even to the point where he comes and he would come into the gym macked out in new Nike stuff every day. And I smiled. I said, Simeon, I bet you get that for free, don't you? And he smiled. I go, I bet you if you didn't look like that though and train as hard as you did, stuff anymore. He goes, you got that right.
Huh. That's funny.
He's ripped.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it. I mean, when he came out, and I think it started on his Twitter account, when he came out and said something about coming back, about possibly coming back and playing for the Bucks. I was kind of checking. I went and did a little bit of recon on the internet, and I've seen some recent pictures of him, and man, he still looks game ready.
Yeah, he's game ready, and he went to University of Illinois too, which there aren't many players, Jeff George, Simeon, but they're not known for placing guys in the NFL, and that was Dad's alumni or alma mater. So yeah, he's a great guy. Other players, I remember when my sister got married to my brother-in-law, John McKay and Hugh Culverhouse were at the wedding and all the parties beforehand, and I would just look at the head coach of the Buccaneers. I was probably 4 feet tall, but in awe. And they were at the party. Tampa was a small town. John McKay would play golf with my brother-in-law's dad 3 times a week over Palmacia. Other notable players, Doug Williams was a great guy. He went on, like a lot of players, to do great things for the Redskins.
Mm-hmm.
Then was brought back into front office operations by the Glazers years later. And, I'm just thinking through all the generations or decades of Bucks football. John Lynch, you're talking about top flight people that have come through this organization,
Oh, no question at all. So tell me, if you could narrow it down, tell me who is the one person that you've had the opportunity to meet that kind of sticks out in your mind as this is one of those moments that I will never forget. I know you've met, like I said, we were talking yesterday, and I know you've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of the players, see a lot of the players. Who's the one that had you, I guess, more starstruck, or the one that you hold on to?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story that is pretty up close and personal, as opposed to, meeting guys in passing and stuff. I know that at the same gym that Simeon would train at, when I say I train with him, that means I'm in the gym at the same time as him. He's training on a level. So, but we would run full court basketball, and they would let the Bucks in for free, just because it's good PR, and we loved playing basketball with them. And during the off season, and I remember, like, members of the greatest Bucks team to date, which was around the Super Bowl: Warwick Dunn, Derek Brooks, Warren Sapp, a guy named Robbie Abdullah that went on to play for the Bears. He would return kicks for us, and a couple other guys would come in. But let's face it, Brooks is Hall of Fame, Sapp is Hall of Fame, and Warwick Dunn will eventually be Hall of Fame. But we were running full court. They'd come in a few times a week, and we'd play like 3 or 4 games. And I was probably, I'm 51 now, so back then, early 30s, 2000, early 2000s, yeah, about early 30s. So we'd all be sucking wind, and ready to go lift after that. And they'd be like, one more game. And I'm like, I'll try, man. But I go, gosh, this is not, what's wrong with this picture? You make like $4 or $5 million a year playing football, and you want to run another game because that competitive fire rages so deep within them. It's kind of like they are who they are because of that competitive fire, even playing pickup basketball with us. So anyway, last time I played before I had my knee scoped, I had torn cartilage in my knee, and Warren Sapp was out there with the other gentleman I mentioned, and everybody squared off. Warren's left. Warren's about 2 times the size, 2 of me's basically. And so I look at him and he smiles back. And I said, Warren, I go, hey, I've got torn cartilage in my knee, and I'm not a all-pro defensive tackle in the NFL. And he smiled and he said, you'll be okay, baby. And we had a good time. He was a cool guy. I mean, he was doing a good job, NFL Network and everything. All these guys are good guys when you meet them, even though, as a player, him and Favre, if you remember those times they'd square off, they'd be jawing at each other, but they're cool guys when you meet them, even though sometimes they're depicted as something else. I can tell you firsthand, they're cool, and if people knew them, they would like them.
Well, and that was going to be the next thing that I was going to ask you, because we do the fan base in general. I hear a lot of talk about some of these guys, and Warren Sapp is one of those names that comes up all the time, of that they're not really very nice people to. If you meet them in person, that they're personality wise, they're not the nicest folks in the room. And like I said, I've heard that about Warren more than probably any other player that's ever been on the Bucs, that he's just not a very nice guy. So I find that really interesting to hear you say that.
Even to the point where I'll be on the field for the Lions game in 3 weeks, and I have 2 little girls, and I'll bring my wife, and was there for the Jets. That's how you and I started talking. Warren was there. They recognized the 2002 team, or 2002 world champions. The Super Bowl was in 2003, but it was the 2002 season. They recognized the team, and they were playing either the Falcons or somebody a few years back. And I was with my daughter. She's 14 now. She's probably 10 at the time. And he had places to be. They were interviewing him and everything, but he stopped, held my daughter, took a picture with her, and he was nice. He said, I got to go now, because, he was the basically the show during halftime. But most of these guys have been pretty cool throughout the years. I think probably when people might throw themselves at them too strongly after too many beverages or something, that might affect them. But if you approach them cool, they usually respond well. They're usually pretty bright. I mean, they're playing at the highest level. They got there for their athletic prowess, but also for, I'd like to think well-rounded nature. And if they're not well-rounded, we'd get them out of Tampa.
Yeah. Well, now I have to ask this, because I'm sure there are people out there that are going to be watching this that are dying to know. You're talking about these guys, world champion football players playing full court basketball. So the question that naturally comes to my mind is, who's the best baller out of all of them? If you got Warren Sapp out there, you got Warwick Dunn out there, you got tell me who all was there. Tell me who's the best baller out of all of them.
I remember, because you're talking about the starting D, and then remember it was Thunder and Lightning. You had Allstott lining up as, they called him a fullback. He was a tailback. You had Dunn as tailback. Then you had Ty J. Armstrong, who was a 270-pound H-back, they called it, which is basically a battering ram up the cut. And, Rhino package, all that good stuff. But those guys were guy. Oh, the cornerbacks played for Florida State. I'll think of it in a minute, but they would come in and play with us too. He went to Middle Tennessee. Donnie Abraham.
Okay.
5'9". He was from Middle Tennessee State University. He was also, I think he made the Pro Bowl. He could jam a basketball at 5'9". I'm 5'10". I can't even touch the rim. So just the athletic ability was off the charts. Even if that wasn't their game, they could play anything.
That's funny. I'm trying to picture Donnie Abraham slamming. That would be something that would be worth seeing. That would be worth seeing for sure.
I saw Muggsy Bogues. I saw Muggsy Bogues, an undergraduate up in North Carolina, jam a volleyball at 5'4". So, which after that, even 5'9", when you can't even touch the rim at 5'10", it's impressive. Martin Mayhew was the other cornerback that would come in and play with us too, from FSU, and he's a great guy. He works for the 49ers now. I think he's in scouting or something out there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. A lot of these guys left around the league in different capacities.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of our guys go on to be very successful in at different levels of different organizations. I love to be able to see that kind of post play career work out for these guys. You see guys like John Lynch now doing well, and lots of in coaching positions and in more in-house positions in different teams. It's always good to see that they've got someplace that they're continuing to be successful off the field. Tell me a little bit about bringing the Super Bowls into Tampa. I know that you said that your dad was a part of that whole thing as well.
Yeah, they would. Well, you have to have an NFL team to host a Super Bowl. And earlier when you were talking about the Super Bowls, and as far as this will be number 5 for us in 2021. We lucked out because the new stadium out in Los Angeles was slated to have it, but construction is a little delayed, so we were first up on the list. Okay, when you are awarded an NFL franchise or you build a new stadium, the league will pretty much carte blanche give you a Super Bowl. But Tampa's had 5. It'll be 5. We had 84 Raiders Redskins. I was at that game. Redskins were favored. Marcus Allen ran for about 130 yards, 140 yards in the second half, and really had no. As being a Raiders fan, I just like their uniforms better. That's why I was, it didn't really matter, and they were the underdog by 14 points. Next one was Giants Bills. Dad and his buddies would also go to all the Super Bowls once they landed the Bucs franchise, and then pitch the owners on giving Tampa Super Bowls. And first one was 84, Giants Bills. Maury wide right for the Bills, or Jim Kelly. You remember that team?
Oh yeah.
And Phil Simms was quarterback. LT, and they went on to win the Super Bowl. It was a real barn burner in Tampa. That was 91, and then 2000 were the Ravens versus the Giants. Trent Dilfer, another former Buck, goes on to keep the chains moving and rely. Good running game, and then I say the second best defense ever, the best defense ever, 2002 Buccaneers. Of course.
Well, let me ask you this, because I think that you probably have a unique perspective. I actually asked a similar question to one of my other guests, who I know has been a fan forever and forever. But what do you see? Well, first of all, I want to ask you this specifically because of the connection that your dad had with the sports in general and in Tampa, and specifically with the Tampa Tribune. What do you see as the biggest differences in football, in Tampa football, in a more general way, with the onset of the internet, social media, instant access to everything? You talked about waiting to grab the paper on Monday morning and look at the sports section. How has that changed? What do you see the differences?
Oh, the information available is unbelievable compared to the old days. You know the deal. You know volumes more than you did when you were a kid. Is voracious of a reader as you were. Now you know everything. And then the latest was Hard Knocks, which I knew more about the game after watching an inside track on the team, players I might not have ever really known or paid attention to or anything. The linebacker Riley Bulla, Bobo Wilson, all this stuff. So it's great because if you're a junkie like we are, or a Buccaholic, you can stay immersed in this stuff 24/7. So it was limited before. Now the sky's the limit.
What do you see any difference? Any major differences in the fan base there in Tampa now as compared to back in the early days?
Yes, I do. Just like I think the NFL fan base has changed in general. It's big business now. It's I think it was more back early on. There was an identity with the community as the home team, and then it got very strong as when they won the Super Bowl, much like the Lightning has now by being a playoff team every year, or every other year, we'll say. But as the Bucks continue to win, there will be the reconnection with the community again, where the players are heroes and everything. They're coming out of a bad economic cycle in Florida now, where three biggest industries in Florida are tourism, government, and then the construction industry. Well, people visiting here probably aren't going to buy seasons tickets. Government people may or may not. Construction industry was decimated worse than the Great Depression. So it's coming out. Ticket sales are coming back. Winning product will fill up the Ray J again. Just give it time. But the fan base, I believe the community and the Bucks will reconnect. They're already doing a good job with some of the moves that they're making too. With the Pewter Report, the social media, breaking it down to more of a personal level than just a team that's far removed from the community. I want to go back to where they're heroes again, and we're winning championships, or at least showing up for the postseason, and then everybody's in on it then. Fortunately, there are people like yourself, even way out on the West Coast, where I'm impressed that, like I said, it hasn't been easy being a Bucks fan. It has to course deep through your veins because many could turn their back on this. But I was delighted to see your social media, Buccaholics, Facebook, and realize there are people. And, in Tampa, we're real fans. They sit around me at every game. They've been there since the first year. And then there's a lot of transients too. They when they lose, they go to their closet and put on a Cowboys jersey for the next season or whatever. I'm not one of them though.
Yeah. Well, I think every team has those fair weather fans. It's good to hear from somebody that's been around since the very beginning that there are still those fans that are there, that are diehard, that have been there the whole time. I've been lucky enough to get to meet and become friends with some of those guys myself. Some people that I know have been with this team through the thick and the thin and the thin and the thin and the thin and the thin. But we're still here. And like, I hear people say it all the time. And I am very proud of the fact that win or lose, that we have fans that have stuck with this team through it all. It's real easy to be a fan of a team that wins every year, that gets to the playoffs every year. But when you're fighting that constant uphill battle as a fan and waiting and hoping that your team is going to make those right moves and cross that line again, it can really try your patience a little bit.
It does. It can be frustrating, but it's become so much of a ritual for us, though, that every year that invoice comes for those tickets, and you don't even think about stroking that check. It's kind of like that's just going to be part of the deal every year, and you get excited before every season. You get frustrated, after the 5 games prior to the last 2, and then now we're feeling good again. I think they can give Atlanta a game Sunday too. I wish I could get out of family duties and drive up to Atlanta, but I don't know if I can pull that off.
Well, I'll tell you, I've got some friends in Atlanta as well, and if you do decide to head up that way, make sure you let me know, because I'll hook you up with some people. They have
I saw your post for the big. I saw the post for the big party they're having, and once again, going back to the available information and stuff. Now I know about tailgate parties even on the road, which is great. So that's caused me to maybe look to do some more traveling now too.
Yeah, they have one hell of a group over there in Atlanta, and they get to do it at least once a year. So they've got their show together over there, man. I wish I could head out there and be with them. They actually were doing a raffle, a charity raffle, where they were giving away some tickets to that game next week, and I bought in, but I didn't win. So if I had won, I could have probably convinced my wife to let me go if I had won the tickets.
Absolutely.
But yeah, man. Let's you mentioned Atlanta. We're gonna get to them in a minute. Let's talk a little bit about what we saw, about what happened yesterday. I say it every episode. I'll say it again. I am not that statistics guy. I'm not going to break down the game for you and tell you who ran what and who caught what and who threw what and what exactly happened. I know at the end of the game there was a W. I know I saw some things that I liked, and I know I saw some things that still need a lot of work. But let's get into that just a little bit. Talk a little bit about that game yesterday down in the deep south of Florida.
Postponed from Hurricane Irma. It wasn't even supposed to be yesterday, but I was, first opening day, September 10th, it was supposed to be, and we were holed up in a house with no power or anything, and no home football game, or no football game, no TV, no nothing. So I don't know how it worked out where both teams that were affected by Irma had the same bye week too. It was unbelievable.
That was really kind of bizarre. I didn't even, and when they first said that they were going to cancel it, I didn't even realize that we both had the same bye until somebody actually said to me, "Oh, well, they'll probably move it to." See, I hold a distinction of my own. I think I may well be the only person in the world who has ever had their birthday party canceled because of a hurricane 3,000 miles away. I was supposed to have it. I was supposed to have everybody up here at my house. All my friends that are down in Southern California and down further south in California were all supposed to come here to watch the game with me because September 10th was my birthday. And when they canceled the game, I canceled the party. So,
happy birthday. It's funny. My youngest daughter is born on September 10th too. And on her actual birthday, we were sitting in a hurricane with, right after she was born, Charlie Francis Ivan came through in 2000. What was that? 2004. And then on September 10th, once again, we're sitting in a house. She was a day old it was September 11th or 12th back then, but we're sitting without power going, wow, once again, right on the birth date that you share, we're caught in the midst of a hurricane. And then I wanted to watch the NFL games, even if the Bucks weren't playing, and it was 24/7 of weather reports. So I'm like, all right, just we'll wait till week 9 or 10 or whatever this is coming up this week.
Yeah.
Excuse me, last week.
Yep. Well, we're getting we got to it finally. I don't know. I wonder if our season might have started out differently if we had been able to play that first game.
I think we would have rolled strong at the beginning of the season, and then it would have shaken out the same way. I think maybe our D was a little exposed. They seemed to be a little soft up underneath, and they're trying to find themselves again. They found themselves last year, though. Mike Smith put together a good defense by the end of the year. They really gelled around the Seattle game, and right now we're one game beyond the halfway point. Are we gonna win? And make the playoffs? Not holding my breath, but I think we're going to win some games now. They find themselves in the second half of the season typically, and that's when it gelled last year. Last year, big time.
So, talking about yesterday, of course, there are a lot of things that we could point out on, I think, on the positive and the negative side. One of the things that that is in the forefront of everybody's mind right now, and I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but the locker room speech after the game with Coach and the game ball going to Patrick Murray. I thought that was a pretty great moment. I definitely am happy to be able to say that I feel like we've got our kicking game at least a little bit settled. I mean, he missed one yesterday, but damn if I'm not willing to give him a pass on one if he's going to make three.
He won the game hands down. We were snake bit. They call it the Matt Bryant curse that we had, because if you remember, he hit that 62-yarder against the Eagles back a number of years ago. Yeah. Then they brought in Kynes and another kicker. Kynes got MRSA from the locker room, and then the other kicker flamed out. Bryant went to Atlanta, and he still kicks for them and lit it up. And we've been cursed. You bring in Aguayo on a first-round draft pick, which never happens. Poor guy, he wasn't cut out for the pros. Then you hired Nick Folk. We wanted to kill him after the New England game. Thursday Night Football, no less.
Well, I think we all know what seems to happen to us in prime time. It's rare that we see a really solid performance in prime time. What did you think about?
But thank God for Murray. He won the game. We let him slip back in it, but he came through. That clutch drive at the end was, in my opinion, the best football they played. Unfortunately, but that's Bucs football for you. It's nerve-wracking and hair-raising, and there's never a dull moment.
Yeah, well, we're a bunch of pirates, and that team makes us drink like pirates. So we have to suffer through a lot of those kind of games, unfortunately. What did you? We have to have this conversation because it's glaringly right in front of us. We've seen two games now with Fitz coming in. And I don't think either one of them could be described as handily won or as pretty games, but ugly W's are W's, and we'll take them. But what do you think about Fitz? I think he.
I like Fitz. I liked him when he was. He's a Harvard guy. How often do you see a Harvard guy in the league? So that got my attention. I think he's played for 8. I know the Dolphins, the Jets, the Bucks, and a host of others. He seems like a cool guy, interviewing in Hard Knocks. And I'm a big Winston fan. Winston fell on his shoulder. Winston was off once he hurt his shoulder. Powder admitted to maybe playing him, even though, in a kind of a backhanded comment, even though maybe he shouldn't have been playing. He was up in Birmingham seeing Dr. Andrews. When you go to Dr. Andrews, you've got some legitimate ailments then. So Fitz steps up like a seasoned veteran, and look what he does. He gets his 2 W's, and it's not real pretty play. But then again, we won the Super Bowl with Brad Johnson, who wasn't the prettiest quarterback ever, but got the job done. Are we going to the Super Bowl? No, but we're winning games, and I'm happy with his performance. Is it going to create a quarterback controversy? I don't know. That'll be a tough decision for Cotter to make when Winston comes back, just because if you're winning, you continue to win. It's like the Tony Romo, Dak Prescott controversy. They kept with winner. We're going to have to keep with the winner, I think. And Winston will have his day. This is only his 3rd year in the league.
Well, they did come out. They made the announcement today that Winston will not play this coming Sunday. He is officially out for this coming Sunday, so we're going to see Fitz again. You talk about you mentioned the question of will it create a quarterback controversy, a quarterback competition right there. I'm one of these guys that I keep looking at this situation, and I hear people, like you said, constant communication, social media, and I see a lot of people out there saying, well, Winston was never the right choice. You know what I see? If I'm being really honest, I see a lot of people that didn't want Winston to begin with, who now feel like they have some justification for saying that. And I disagree.
They went quiet too, and typically down here in Florida, we've got a real fierce rivalry between the Florida Gators and the Florida State Seminoles.
Of course.
This year, really bad football, but typically it's been pretty good. We're in the top 10 every year, and the animosity between the two schools is off the charts. So most of the Winston haters, I'll call them, I found to be Gator fans, and they couldn't look past, Hayes a Buck now or whatever. He started winning games. They started coming around. Now he's got all this silly off-field stuff with an Uber driver. If he were winning games, nobody would be talking about the Uber driver right now. It's just the 5 games he dropped because I believe it was from his injury and he was playing anyway. That's what's hurting him now. He'll be back, though, and I think we made the right move by drafting him. Mariota has bad games, too. Look what happened to him last week or the week before last.
I'll tell you one thing that I notice that I like is there seems to be from Fitzpatrick a level of calmness, a level of composure in the huddle, under center. To me, he seems like a very steady hand. He seems to me like the kind of guy that, for whatever reason, and I don't know, maybe it has to do with, I'm sure it has to do with his age and his experience, but he just seems to me like he is a deep breath when Winston is a hyperventilation. You know what I mean? I love Winston. Don't get me wrong. I do. I think he was the right choice for this team when we drafted him, and I still think he's the quarterback for this team moving forward. But there is something to be said for the demeanor of a guy like Fitzpatrick, who is able to come in, like you said, veteran guy. He's got the years under his belt. He knows how to manage the team. He knows how to get these guys, and he can make the plays when we need the plays made. He's proven that 2 weeks in a row now. And like you said, that last drive yesterday, that clutch drive in the final minutes yesterday to get us back in field goal range, which allowed Patrick Murray to win that game for us. That was that was just good football. Let's say we know this week is a no-go. So let's say 2 weeks from now, you said you're going to be at the game, right?
The next home game, yeah. Atlanta, I don't think I can pull that off. If it were another weekend besides Thanksgiving weekend, maybe. But anyway,
okay.
Yeah.
So
Detroit's coming.
Let's just say that Winston stays on the sidelines until Detroit. We come into that week and we find that we have a healthy Jameis Winston. And let's just say, for the sake of saying, that we managed to pull off the win in Atlanta.
And Green Bay, too.
And Green Bay. Now, I think Green Bay is a very winnable game, and I don't think it will matter who's under center. I still think Green Bay is a winnable game for us. If our defense plays well, then we shouldn't have an issue there. Of course, I've said that before and been proven horribly wrong on the field, but that's what they say. That's why they play the games. But let's just say we go 2 more wins in a row, and we come back into our house in Raymond James Stadium with a healthy Jameis Winston. Do you play him, or do you roll with Fitzpatrick?
If you win 2 more games, and Winston will be the starter again eventually, but if you're winning, you continue with Fitz. Even if they split, assuming he didn't get blown out or throw 4 or 5 picks, I'd still be starting Fitz. I love Jameis Winston. I've defended him as a Buck the whole time he's been here. Fitz brings experience and maturity. Winston is a phenomenal athlete. I've seen him single-handedly win games for us, back against the wall. And much like someone with maybe not the experience Fitz has, I've seen him implode and lose games too. Fitz is consistency. Fitz moves the chains. Fitz can even run. I didn't know he could run until.
I don't think anybody knew Fitz could run.
And he can also, one thing too that's.
And he can slide head first too.
Right, that's right. He's fearless. One thing too, we picked up Djax. I think he might be the top paid receiver, one of them in the league for the deep threat. Fitz hit Djax on the run in stride, and Winston has, he's completed some passes to him, but never a bomb with a score. And I think it's just kind of finding your way with experience, timing, and accuracy. Fitz has that. He's already done it. He did that when he came in when Winston first got hurt. Then Winston started another game or two and was obviously in a lot of pain, then fell on his shoulder again against New Orleans. So let's keep rolling with Fitz. I want Jameis Winston to be our quarterback again. I really do. I think Fitz wants to retire one day. But for the meantime, let's win games.
I don't think that there's anybody who actually watches games and knows anything about the game of football or about Jameis Winston as a quarterback that will not be willing to admit that his long ball is questionable. His deep ball is Jameis Winston's deep ball accuracy is questionable as all hell. We've seen it repeatedly, overthrowing, underthrowing, overthrowing. I mean, when you got a guy like Djax out there and you're throwing to him like he's Mike Evans, and vice versa, for that matter, there's the deep ball for Winston is suspect. And I don't think that we're going to see any resolution to that anytime soon. That's just going to, like you said, continued experience, continued practice with that. And I'm hoping that it will improve. But I appreciated the fact that Fitz is able to throw to Djax in stride like that. That's a good look. That's something that we desperately need. I personally, what everybody kept talking about bringing in Djax and how we have this deep threat coming in now, deep threat. I don't even care if we see Djax as a deep threat, because to me, where he is really dangerous is anywhere he gets the ball with an open field in front of him. He's dangerous. It's not so much, to me, with him, it's not so much a deep ball kind of situation. It's get him that damn ball in space and let him make a play with his legs, because he's so damn fast. He's so fast. And we've seen it happen a few times, and I love it every time it does. When we hit him on like a 10 or 15 yard with like a 10 or 15 yard pass, the same kind of shit that we're throwing to a Cameron Brate, for example, but then giving him the opportunity to get those yards after the catch. That's one of the things that I think a lot of people are missing, is they want to see deep ball to Djax. I just want to see him get the ball in space, and I wouldn't care if we threw 10, 15-yard hitches to Djax all day for the rest of the season, because I'm a believer in the fact that at least a few of those he's going to be able to break a play with his legs.
Absolutely. I remember we had a receiver, Joey Galloway, a few years back, if you recall, and I think he too was the fastest guy in the NFL at the time. Garcia was the quarterback. He'd hit him in stride occasionally, torch some safeties and cornerbacks, but he'd get it to him in space and yards after the catch were, if he can get a seam or get a little bit of space, they're easier to tackle than the big guys like Evans and the tight ends. Jackson.
Oh yeah. What do you think?
Yeah.
I gotta talk about this for a minute at least. What do you see with our run game right now? What do you think is the answer, or is there an answer on our current roster to this run game? The issues that we're having with the run game. We saw Doug got a few plays yesterday. There were a couple of plays where he managed to bust off some yards, but for the most part, hand the ball to Martin. He's going 2, 3, maybe 4 yards, and that's about it. Is it a running back situation? Is it an O-line situation? What do you think?
Well, I think that Martin is a great running back. I think that we're not getting him holes. I think if he were playing for another, got him holes, he'd be top 5 running backs in the league right now. I think also we need another back that's maybe a little bigger than him, just, as a complementary to Martin runs hard, but get one of the bigger backs, the 230-pound backs that can maybe pound a little bit harder, soften up some Ds, get them tired, or have Martin soften up some Ds, vice versa. We need a closer, where right now we've got 3 backs that are roughly, 200 or some change, short guys. We need a big guy, a horse back there too. And, I was a big proponent of drafting Dalvin Cook, went to Minnesota, lit it up, tore his ACL, unfortunately. So we're better off with Howard because of the injury. But remember, some of the first games he had were off the charts for Minnesota. I think we need a big back, and I think we need to keep Martin. The other 2 guys, Jacquizz Smith and Barber, they're doing a good job. But if you remember when Martin was suspended for the first 3 or 4 games, once he showed up, it was like been amongst boys out there with Martin running the ball versus the guys this season.
Yeah, I mean, coming back in, there was definitely some fire there that I think has and of course, different things have different quarterback, different lineup. We've got Ali Marpet moved to center now, which is a big change on the line. Personally, I think Ali Marpet's one of those players that's going to be successful no matter where you put him. He's probably one of my favorite players on the team right now, just for that aspect alone. There's something about him. There's an intangible about him as a player that I just can't get past the fact that he's going to be a success no matter where we put him. There are a lot of people questioning the move for him to center. I think that we definitely have some moves to make on our offensive line. In order to get that run opened up, for whether it be for Martin or whether it be for another bigger back, like you said, I'm definitely not opposed to that as an option as well. I don't know though. There's got to be a solution. We cannot continue to play games without a somehow substantial running game, without somehow beefing up that run game. Especially with Fitz under center. I mean, he's solid, but he's not got that showstopper quality for me. we got to get a run game. We got to make these defenses respect us a little bit in the run. And I don't think that they are right now. And I don't think we've given them a reason to be right now. What do you think about this game coming up? We've got Atlanta. I don't know, man.
Well, it's hard to say, but we played them well. Last year we opened up against them and shocked the nation when we beat them, and then they crushed us the next time. I watched them play this year. They look, Super Bowl caliber, and they've also had some, I believe they've had some marginal games too. So we'll see. I think the advantage we have is Smith came from Atlanta. I believe Cotter came from Atlanta too. So, they know their playbook, we'll just say, for, and hopefully they can pull something off, because if they can, we'll be 4-6. And then, wild card's a long shot, but then we're at least still showing up on the D when they list the standings, as a,
right.
Outside, long shot, dark horse, we'll call it.
I think it's good timing for us to have our linebackers back in the game healthy. I think we're definitely going to need Levante and Quan to make some big plays next week.
We're coming off 2 victories. We seem to be improving every week. It's a coin toss right now. I mean, I'd love to sit here and tell you, hey, we're going to win. But I think it's worth watching. And I just hope they make it a respectable game, and they show up, and hope it's tight. And of course, I hope they win, but I just hope it's a respectable game. I know that's Ryan is one of Matty Ice is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Julio Jones, they got top shelf players, but I'm hoping our D can hold them, and we can run the ball, can do his thing, and just anything's possible,
Anything's possible. Okay, that sounds a little bit less enthusiastic than I am right now, but that's all right. I'm gonna give you that one.
Anything's possible. If you look, I'm sure the odds on the game or the line's going to be something outrageous, but I believe we'll make it a game, and I believe there's a fair chance we can pull a W out of it.
I think there's something to be said for the fact that, like, I've heard a few people saying this after this last 2 games, that we need to see this team step up and beat a team that's actually a challenge. Not that, I mean, looking at the score, we can't say that yesterday wasn't a challenge, but we need to see this team step up and beat a team that's winning. We need to see this team step up and beat a team that the rest of the country is looking at as winners. Atlanta would definitely be a major step up, in my opinion, if we're able to pull off a win against Atlanta.
Major step up.
What's that?
A major step up. And, let's face it. Well, actually, the Jets have been playing pretty well until we manhandled McCown and took care of business last week. But and then the Dolphins, they're marginal, but we almost needed 2 easy wins to kind of find ourselves again. So this is the big test. We lost 5 in a row. I almost felt like the team was losing their identity when they were riding the honeymoon from Hard Knocks into the Bears and, Giants, and then a couple barn burners, close games we could have easily won against Buffalo and New England. And then they slump. But I don't care if they're easy wins or not. They're wins. It builds confidence, some momentum. So I think we have a better chance playing Atlanta now than we would have, earlier in the season. So I'm all for it. I'm excited about the game.
Let me ask you this one quick question. I don't want to go too deep into it, but everybody's talking about the possibility of coaching changes once again in Tampa. And I know that you've watched us go through this carousel, this revolving door of coaching staffs in Tampa over the years. Let me ask you this, and I'm going to put it to you this way. How many wins do we need to have at the end of the season for Cutter to feel safe? Because I don't think he feels safe right now.
I think if he does what he did last year, we won 9 games, 9-7, didn't make the playoffs. I think he'll keep his job for another year. I think that the owners want a winning product. Manchester United is now making a bunch of money over there. It's highly valuable. When they dismantled the team, Manchester United was in the red. Now they're one of the most profitable sports franchises out in the market right now. So now they're dumping their money into the Bucks. So they're not going to tolerate, but they may be a little more patient with Cotter because, there's been improvement since Schiano and Lovey, but he's not going to have an extended. Oh, wait a minute! I think I've lost you here.
I can still hear you.
He's not going to. Yeah, they're not. He's not going to have years to build this team. Then you hear about Gruden wanting to come back, and Gruden lives in Tampa, and he's had some NFL teams approach him, but he's turned them down. But to me, it's just more information out there that we talked about earlier, just to saturate ourselves with fodder all the time. So,
I think probably at least 20 in the last 2 days, separate individuals posting about, or just in the last week, probably closer to 50 separate individuals posting about the possibility of John Gruden coming back and coaching the Bucks again. I don't put any serious credence, give any serious credence to any of these reports. If John Gruden himself steps up to a microphone and says, "Hey, I'm interested in coaching the Bucks," that's the moment that I'll believe that it's a possibility. Until then,
at that point, I would say let's sign him up, and but I hope we stay with Cotter for a little while, unless a real blue chipper comes along, or a guy that's got a proven track record, bought a championship to Tampa. Maybe have a strong general manager that is able to maybe keep control of the drafting and the free agency. Gruden's a great coach. His shortcoming was the free agency and getting all these guys that were 10 years in the league that were studs, but they come in and they're, you couldn't build long term with guys in their late, mid 30s. So anyway, have some balance there in management and coaching.
Yeah, let's not bring any more of those players that are only coming to Florida to retire, right?
Exactly.
We don't need to do that anymore. All right. Hey, we got to break this thing down, but I can't let you get away without asking you some questions. Now, you know this. This last little segment that I like to do, I call it the Flash Five. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and I want you to think fast and answer even faster. Now, I'll ask you the questions. You get to give me your answer. If you need an extra few seconds to explain that answer, I'll allow that. But I don't want you to put too much effort into this, too much thought into it. I want you to go with it right off the top of your head. And I know that you have been had the opportunity to meet a lot of players, see a lot of games. So I want to kind of get your instinct reaction off of a few of these things. All right. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I got 5 questions for you. We're going to start with first question. You ready? First question.
Yep.
Who is the best player you ever saw play live?
Barry Sanders.
Barry Sanders. Okay. Got to go with that. Got to go deep for that answer. All right, here we go. Finish this sentence. Jameis Winston is
the quarterback of the future.
Okay. All right. I'm with that. You've been there for a long time, so I'm going to ask you this one. Question number 3. Here it is. Best Bucks uniform. Creamsicle, Super Bowl, or new?
I like them all. but I like the creamsicle more now than I did in the 70s when we were not winning any games. But I I went out and bought a creamsicle jersey this year and wear it. I love them now. They grew on me over time. I really like the new uniforms. Anyway, short answers. The current uniform is phenomenal.
All right. Question number 4. Most memorable Bucks touchdown you ever saw live?
I would say that when Sean King was quarterback in the Bucks against the Rams on Monday Night Football, and they had him by the shirt tail, and he pitched it to Dunn, and that kept him alive to go for the playoff run. Then.
Oh, that's a good answer. All right, good answer. All right, final question. Ready for it? Final question. One former Buccaneer player who you would love to see come back at their prime and play on this current team.
So let's see who's in the league now. Well, I'd have to go with directly across the street from me, who plays for Washington, just because he's my neighbor and he's a good guy, Mason Foster. He bought the house right behind me here, and for Washington, and it'd just be nice to have a middle linebacker for the Bucks as opposed to the Redskins living across the street from me.
Well, that's definitely not the answer I was expecting. That kind of came from a different place than I had planned, but I'll take it. Mason Foster playing middle linebacker for the Bucks. Yeah, let's get that.
Then I could go chat with my neighbor, maybe like borrow a cup of sugar or something on a Monday and get more good material for you too, you know?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Hey, Mark, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you coming on the show. I want to shout out my buddy John Superfan Blakey in Atlanta. I know they're getting ready for that game next week, and I wish them all the best for their tailgate and the charity work that they're trying to do there as well. And any Buccaholics that are planning on heading to Atlanta for that game, make sure that you hit them up. Their tailgate's going to be off the chain. If you're in Southern California, I'm going to be down in Southern California in Orange County, hanging out with some buddies next week on the tail end of my Disneyland trip. And hopefully we will be celebrating by the end of that game a win against those Dirty Birds from Hotlanta. And that's going to do it for another episode of Buccaholics Fan-Tastic, you guys. Hopefully y'all dig it. And we'll come back for episode 10 here soon. Mark, thank you one more time for being here, brother.
And thank you for what you do for Bucks Nation, too. We really appreciate it, man. Bringing us all together.
All right, man. We are out of here.